So with that, I wanted to bring up, the problem verses, right? Just really just get
There's only like one
everybody
or
real
two.
uncomfortable.
Hey,
Yeah, we got a comment already?
now we're learning.
Huh?
I had to click go live.
Oh, so we're not even on?
No, I was just previewing. Now
No way.
we were on Rumble. We got 4 views on Rumble who are with us.
Okay.
Sorry, viewers on Rumble.
All right.
And then on YouTube, I was watching and it said preview, not live. So I'm looking. Hit go live. I've never had to do that before.
Oh, man.
Is that because we made a preview?
We scheduled it because we scheduled it.
Oh, my goodness.
No.
Yeah. So sorry, YouTube. Hang in there. We'll get you back.
Man, maybe. All right, I got
See, now my phone just buzzed.
I was going to say,
Yep,
I got
mine did
30.
too.
I've got 30 people saying, where is this at? No, I don't really.
Well, Brienne texted me. She's like, "Why aren't you guys live yet?" I was like, "Oh." I was
All
like,
right.
"We are."
We are.
All right, so now that we're live, here's the issue. Because we did a premiere for the first time, we didn't go through
It's
YouTube.
not a premiere. We scheduled when we were going to have a thing.
Okay, so we scheduled our live show,
Yeah.
and we didn't go through the YouTube college,
Right.
right? So we don't have the degree.
I click buttons.
We
and it's
are
like,
uneducated.
I think this is what we want to do.
Yeah,
And then when we get there,
yeah,
there's some finagling.
right. There's a button that says, "Hey, do you want to go live?"
Do you want to do it now?
Yeah,
Do you want to do it now?
right.
I
And
had
we
to-
had we
I had
didn't
to
push
hit
it.
it.
Yeah.
So we did.
Which is
Okay.
weird because we scheduled it, but
All right. So for the rumblers, do you think they would be okay if we just did this intro again real quick so that the YouTubers are in on that?
Well,
Okay, so
I
listen,
can sum it up faster too.
listen, rumblers, we're just gonna go through this again for our YouTubers, even if they come on. So we decided that this is going to be an apologetics. Once a month, we're gonna take uneducated, and we're going to deal with apologetic type of issues. And Justin has decided that he would love to be a part of that because I've always seen Justin's heart for apologetics. And so we're going to have Justin kind of think through topics, and we're going to every once in a while maybe even throw a topic out and say, hey, that's good. And then we're going to work through them. So tonight, like I said, we've got one of the least controversial and the easiest ones, and that's slavery.
Slavery.
And so, Justin, go ahead and give us an introduction then real quick.
Yeah, so the reason reason I picked this one is it's always been in the back of my mind, kind of like, oh, I think I know some answer to this. Some of these make sense, but I've never fully thought it through. So this is a good format to think it all the way through and, actually dig into the word.
Right.
And then also all the debates and kind of lives or apologetic pieces that I've watched don't really answer my question it's not to my satisfaction, essentially. It doesn't scratch the itch. It's like, I don't know. There might be, it's not as convincing as I want it to be.
Right.
Doesn't make complete sense to me. And so, why not do the research ourselves, right? Figure it out and get an answer for us.
I'm so into that. Like when I'm studying the Bible and stuff, I'm like, commentaries are fine.
Yeah.
Study Bibles are fine, but I love to just dig in.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Oh, yeah.
you can go so much deeper. And a lot of times you find out, hey, this guy's got a good point, but I really think,
Yeah.
there's something else we should be looking at.
Yeah.
And so it's so much fun.
I mean, that's why it's the living word, right?
Right.
It speaks to you personally in your situation, and then hopefully to your congregation as well. God, the Holy Spirit's leading you in the direction that you should be going.
Right.
Which is cool.
All right, cool.
So with that, I wanted to bring up the problem verses. Start with riling everybody up and
Okay, great.
maybe make you question some things when you hear these verses.
Awesome.
So this will be.
I'm ready.
Yeah, the first one's going to be Leviticus 25.
Oh,
I love this one.
you can't read Leviticus, though,
Oh, why not?
because that's a bunch of old-timey curmudgeons, and
No.
they tell you this and yes, no. They say you can do this, you can't do. I don't like it. All right, go ahead.
So
I just want you to know my guard's up.
Oh,
my
you
guard is
yeah,
up.
yeah. Well, I guess let me ask this question, because here's the question that bugged me. I guess I'll frame it the way I framed it to Brian the first day we were meeting is, Matt, why, if the Bible's so clear, even in Leviticus and Numbers and just Mosaical law, right? It's very clear to point out sin and say, you were supposed to be set apart, right? You're my people. You're supposed to be set apart. My struggle is why doesn't just clear cut say, hey, slavery, don't do it? Because in the same way I'm telling you not to do these other sins, I'm going to name this a sin.
That's a really good question.
And I want you to be set apart. Don't do it.
That's a good question.
Because I agree we don't live by Levitical law either, like currently. I agree with that.
Right.
But my issue is it also calls out other things for them to stop doing, but it doesn't specifically call out slavery.
Yeah.
And so like that's my struggle, right? That's the struggle.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think I have some good I don't think we'll leave there. I think I'll have some good answers.
Well, listen, I'm very positive on what I'm already hearing. I think I can start a website.
We're gonna have like hats and shirts too and stuff.
No, it's gonna be good. All right, move on. Move on.
Leviticus 25. What, Justin? Where are we starting at?
44 through 46 is the problem section.
All right, Leviticus 44. All right. Can I read it for us?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
All right. So this is New American Standard. As for your male and female slaves, whom you may have, you may acquire male and female slaves from the pagan nations that are around you. Then too it is out of the sons of the sojourners who live as aliens among you, that you may gain acquisition, and out of their families who are with you, whom they will have produced in your land, they also may become your possession. You may even bequeath them to your sons after you to receive as a possession. I'm sorry. This is really a problem verse. All right.
No, it's cool. It's cool. We
Yeah.
can actually we can leave them to our relatives after we die.
That's right. That's right.
Inheritance.
I like
Yeah,
this. It's
yeah.
good.
You can use them as permanent slaves, but in respect to your countrymen, the sons of Israel, you shall not rule with severity over one another. And then that's 46. How far?
I had just have till 46.
Okay. All right.
As the problem. Like, so I want to frame this now as like, whoever's watching going to get all up in arms. Oh, you might have your own opinions about this verse.
Right.
Which is good.
Right.
And if, we got people that aren't, regular followers of Christ,
Right.
they're like, oh yeah, this is why I'm not. This stands out. I brought this verse up before,
Yeah.
that I have a problem with that, and that's why I'm not,
Right. Right.
So,
First of all,
yeah.
me and my boyfriend can have slaves? Is that what you're telling me? All right. Sorry.
Sin is sin, right?
Sorry.
Right.
Gotcha.
So then, with that, right, I want, again, the question being, why is he not calling them to be set apart and just cutting this cold turkey, right?
Right.
Where he has said this for other sins, for the Israelites, right? Also, very clearly, the problem here is we're looking at people as property. That's very clear, a moral issue. And then also we're getting a little bit into valuing more other people groups over neighboring country people groups, right?
Right.
So like obviously you can't rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly, which implies that you can rule ruthlessly over your slaves from other countries.
Yeah.
Potentially. Again.
Yeah.
So I want
Right.
people to think about these, mull them over, because if we
Harshness.
I already have so many thoughts.
if we we have to make sense of this
Yeah.
as Christians to be
Right.
consistent, morally consistent, logically consistent. So this is a verse that has to make sense.
Can you say it out loud one more time, the verse?
Yeah.
What is the... No, don't read it. Just what's the verse?
Leviticus 25.
All right. So if anybody wants to just... Because there's some people jumping in here.
All right, 44 through 46.
Okay.
Okay. So I want to throw out, first thing is this, and Justin, you could probably speak to this, but so in the culture that Israel found itself in, or even before Israel became Israel, owning people and slavery was a human construct, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so it's not like Israel's in this place and God's like, hey, I got this great idea. Go own some people, right?
Yep.
So that's the first thing I think we want to get out there,
This
right?
did not start with the Bible,
Right.
obviously. So
Right.
slavery way predates
Right.
Levitical law.
Right. Okay, so we can at least say that slavery is a human construct, not a God construct.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. I think that's important for what I have later too. I
Okay.
mean, that's a good point.
All right. All right. Cool. So tell us some of your thoughts then on this passage, Justin.
Well, let's jump around a little bit.
Okay.
We're gonna go to Exodus 21 for my other issue.
Okay.
I have 2 spots.
I don't have an
Exodus.
issue with Exodus 21, so I don't know what's up with that, but I studied that one.
Exodus 21. What 2 through 6 is first.
Yeah. While you're looking at that, Matt, is there any kind of thoughts there that we need to think about? Or
Our guest last week jumped in. Justin, just got off work. What are you dudes talking about? Jesus stuff?
we are.
We are.
Yeah.
We are. I told him slavery, something light and easy.
Yeah. Light.
Light, just light topic.
Yeah. Tell them to stay on.
Yeah, stay on.
Yeah.
Put on your seatbelt.
Don't go anywhere. Yeah. This is gonna get crazy.
All right.
All right, Justin, go ahead.
Yep. So we got Exodus 21 2 through 6.
Okay.
Now, yeah, there's potential good that you can see in this verse. But anyway, it says, what's mine? Mine's NIV. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve you for 6 years, but in the 7th year he shall go free without paying anything. If he comes alone, he is to go free alone, but if he has a wife, when he comes, she is to go with him. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the woman and her children shall belong to her master, and only the man shall go free. But if the servant declares, I love my master and my wife and children and do not want to go free, then his master must take him before the judges. He shall take him to the door or the doorpost and pierce his ear with an awl. Then he will be his servant for life. Okay?
Yep.
I mean, potential issues there, right? We're again talking about here's the process that you can have a slave for life. Right? Like that's one of the issues there. Now with that though, this is Exodus, this is Old Testament, right?
Uh-huh.
And so there obviously is a certain provision for slaves after 6 years, even in the Old Testament, which when we talked originally, I wasn't sure about that. I wasn't sure if that applied to all Old Testament slavery, but apparently it does in Exodus. I thought that was like a newer New Testament concept.
Oh, no, it
but
does apply.
Letting him go that year of Jubilee, right,
Yep.
the 7th year,
Yeah.
allows them to go debt free or
Right.
no longer being a slave.
So that same passage you were in earlier, Leviticus 25, if you go up just a little bit in 39, if your countryman of yours becomes so poor with regard to you that he sells himself to you.
Yep.
And so this is I think this is the same concept in Exodus.
Yep.
Is that we're not just going and buying Hebrews, like we're not just buying slaves. We're like, okay, we've got a brother who's poor, or he's indebted to you for some reason, and you've got this indentured servant concept. And so that's really that's the idea of Exodus 21, right?
Yep.
That we're looking at.
Yep. Exactly.
So, okay.
So then let's move to it's still 21, but verses 20 through 21.
Okay.
Now again, if we're looking at these, even that one, right? Even 2 through 6. If we're looking at these from the outside of the Christian faith, that still has some issues, that certain people might have problems with,
Okay.
right?
So can we think through some of those issues? Like what would you say the first issue would be? Just the fact that you shouldn't own someone.
Oh, right. Yeah. We're still talking about property in a sense here. Where you could argue that this is the process of how to buy a slave and what to do. And then the other issue potentially is you're piercing his ear to mark him or brand him, right, as property, right? And then it also
like a
is
cattle or whatever.
Exactly,
Okay.
right.
All right.
That potentially could be an issue as well. But then also this is a life slave now, right?
Okay.
This isn't just now obviously this is an exception. This is if he wants to stay.
Right, he's
he should
making
stay.
a choice.
And I think that's foreshadowing to something that we're going to talk about later, but
Okay.
for face value, out of context, there's some issues with that.
Okay. All right.
And then in Exodus 21, verses 20 through 21, this one's a little rough too. Anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result.
This is Exodus 21:21?
21, 20 through 21.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Chapter 20, verse 20 through 21. But they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or two, since a slave is their property.
I mean, that makes sense. Total sense.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it makes it easier for me.
Yeah.
There's some justice here.
Well,
Right?
there has to be.
You can't kill them.
No.
Exactly.
No.
All
All
right.
right.
You're out of work too. You know,
Yeah.
you lose money.
Yeah.
But
This is a tough one.
It
It is.
Here's what's fun, though. Justin's bringing all these out, and I think we're going to come back, and hopefully we're going to help people see that the scriptures are pretty clear that we have a merciful, caring, and gracious God.
I wanted to frame these like someone is attacking the faith.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like the way I see it attacked is they're pulling these out of context.
Right.
They're only giving a few verses at a time.
Right.
They're not giving a chapter at a time. They're not giving context to any of these. And the big discussion is what is Levitical or Mosaic law, all of what Moses wrote for the Israelites, right? They don't think of that context. They just look at these flat out. So and these before the study would have been a problem for me. I would have said, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know.
Yeah.
And those don't sit well with me originally.
Right.
But I think we can get pretty clear on them for sure. So.
All right. Good. So you have some more then you're going to look at?
No, so that was the last one. So obviously issues here is we're referring to slaves as their property at the very end of that one as well. And then, of course, it seems like it's condoning or there's a process to now beat your slave.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
As punishment, right?
All right. Yeah.
So going on. Yeah, I mean, anything else that stands out?
Well, I was going to say, so if we're going to take those ones that are some of the more problematic ones, do we want to start picking them apart now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So can we go back to the Leviticus 25? Is it Leviticus 25?
Yep. Verses 44 through 46.
Yeah. So let's start throwing that around. So actually earlier in 39, he talks about your countrymen becoming poor, and that's the indentured servant part, that he sells himself to you. He shall be as your hired man, verse 40. He'll serve you for 6 years, but at the year of Jubilee, you have to let him go free. So he can only be a slave for 6 years, no matter how much he owes you. You can only do that for 6 years, and then you got to set him free. And when you set him free, you also got to make sure you take care of him.
Yeah. Set him off with property.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah, you send him away with property. Yeah.
I don't know if I like that.
All right.
All right.
42 says, they are my servants whom I brought out of the land. So the idea is that God is saying, hey, I brought you out of the land. I took care of you. So remember that, how you treat, those people who are sojourners. And then we get to 44. As for your male and female slaves, so it's assuming that you already have male and female slaves, like not Hebrews, not countrymen, but these are male and female slaves. So they are living. So Israel is living in a world and a culture where the human construct is we do have slaves. We can have slaves. Okay. So Israel has somehow said, okay, we're going to have female slaves and male slaves, and you may acquire male and female slave. So he says it right here. You may acquire male and female slaves from the pagan nations that are around you. You may do that. Now, the question is, why would you want to have, if God said, don't marry the pagan nations, they're going to lead you into idolatry, the question has to be, why then would God go around there and go, it's okay to make him your slave?
Right.
So
I think get firewood.
Yeah.
Gets your firewood.
We don't care what you believe as long as you're getting our firewood for us.
Well, it serves you right for not believing.
Okay, all right, I got you. Yeah.
You wouldn't be in this position if you would have believed.
Yeah.
Pagan.
See, Justin and I were talking about this, and I don't know if Justin came to this conclusion, but I started thinking to myself that this is about showing grace and mercy on the pagan nations, particularly like during war times.
We could have killed you all.
Exactly.
Yep.
Like sometimes that guy up there tells us to level everything.
Yeah.
babies, women.
That's exactly
animals.
That's exactly right.
I
You're
think that's
lucky.
that's a good potential apologetics point too, right? That comes up often too, right? But that's and so this is where we can get into a whole bunch of different questions, because that would then bring up another question for me as somebody looking at it from the other side. But sticking to slavery, right, is I mean, he's called his people to just level
Right.
the evil nation, right? They're against God, they're evil,
Yeah.
right?
So you're lucky you're here. Get back to stacking that wood.
Yeah. So yeah, you could say that. Yeah. Or keep making those bricks out of straw
Yeah.
and mud or whatever you make those.
We have
bricks
a beautiful house to build here. Let's
Yeah.
go.
I need my pyramids built, people. All right, millions of them. So that's first thought, that there may be grace and mercy going on here, because it doesn't seem logical that the God who said, "Don't take for yourself wives of the pagan nations, don't get involved with them because they're going to lead you astray with their gods," and then he says it's okay that you take. And I don't think, this is my personal opinion, I don't think God's saying it's okay.
Yeah.
I just think he's saying that you're living in this culture, you want to be like all the other nations, this is what you're doing, I'm going to give you some parameters.
Yep.
But go ahead, Justin.
No, that's my end conclusion. We didn't get a chance to talk about go there, and that is kind of what I get into more.
Okay.
What I've thought about more and done a little bit more research on. Right. I also wanted to talk about I don't see from what I've seen, I don't see very many. I don't know if there's any instance of these people not being indentured servants. Right.
Okay.
In the Old Testament. Even the nations that they conquer, they still are owed a debt to the people that take them in.
Okay.
Right? So legally, right? So we're talking about under their law, there still is a debt to be owed, and they're paying that debt. And according to Exodus, even those people get a year of Jubilee, correct?
I think so, yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah, as long as I think that's a part of once they become, they're no longer an alien or a stranger, they become, they convert to become one of the children of Israel.
Yeah, yeah. And so with that, the grace that you were talking about too, these people were and are, not saying the Israelites weren't,
And we'll get to that, right?
moral people, but
Right.
these people in the other countries that God calls to overthrow are doing evil acts.
Right.
Right. And so the grace that we're talking about too is we're bringing them into a holy nation.
Right.
Right. We're bringing and showing them who God is.
Right.
Right. Otherwise they're lost. And they are not, they're worshiping other gods,
Right.
doing evil things
Right.
directly against God and against the Israelites.
Right.
So they now have the opportunity to change their ways, learn who the God of the Bible is,
Yeah.
right?
I think that's a beautiful point. Because say for instance you're out here and you've got Hittite people and Perizzite people, and there's slaves on the there's slaves up there to be bought, and there's a Hittite person over here, and they're like, hey, I'll give you $20 or whatever. And think about this. Think about the amazing mercy and goodness that person could be taken into a culture that's going to treat them terrible.
They were deceived too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and they're going to be a part of all kinds of idolatry. And yet a person from Israel, if it's done right, and like you just mentioned, Israel didn't do it right all the time, but if an Israelite would have done that right, they could have taken that person in, showed them grace and mercy, loved them, and possibly that person could have turned and been a part of the life-giving country or the life-giving possession of God's, which is called Israel.
Yep.
I just want to say, if I were not a Christian,
Yeah.
that is really stretching the rubber band.
You think?
Yeah.
Why? Why would you say that?
You're saying, because I'm a good person, it's a good thing I have slaves.
No, I'm saying that.
I'm glad that guy who is going to work for nothing other than a roof over his head and some food
Yeah.
and possibly be beaten is with that nice man.
Well,
He could have been with the bad one.
but there's a part. So I guess my mindset's different because there's a part of me that goes, "We live
I know where I'm sympathetic to where you're at.
Yeah.
Let's not run around preach that.
Well,
We'll call that an argument.
I told Justin. I said we're probably gonna. Maybe I'm gonna get beat up now. I said we're probably gonna get nailed on some of this stuff.
No, this is great.
But
I like that though. Like if you see anything from that point, I think you should keep saying it. From the point, I think we should be looking at it from that point, right? It's like, how does this look?
I agree. Yeah.
I just don't. You're not going to win anybody.
No, I agree. I think we have other things here.
We should do other things.
Yeah. I guess just in my head, I'm thinking to myself, like, if I'm destitute and I'm already someone else's possession, and I'm in a culture where this is how it is, and someone comes along, it's like it's actually, and maybe we'll talk about this, but it's like Jesus came, and I know this is totally different because he's God and we're human, but Jesus came and he bought us back from our slavery.
There's some obvious mirroring there.
Yeah.
Maybe not direct.
Right.
But there's obviously some crossover there, some mirror, some analogy there, right?
Right.
I think the other thing too is if we're talking about salvation, eternal salvation, in the Old Testament, you have to follow these commands that God gives, right? Sacrifice the lamb is your form of repentance back then, right? They don't have the Holy Spirit living in them. We're talking about in the end game here, which you would talk to a Christian now or a non-Christian now about that stuff. This is life and death eternally. This isn't life physical. We're talking about life and death eternally. And so if they weren't following those practices, I mean, they aren't saved. They don't get the chance. They don't follow Yahweh, right? Or the God of the Bible.
Yeah. Go ahead, Matt.
So Justin says, Mackie, most people were relieved because becoming an indentured servant meant that you were being saved from destitution and starvation.
Yeah.
And I think, I think that really has a lot more to do with this. Being a practical thing for people back then was a war. I mean, but the idea that people understood that you were born with nothing.
Yeah.
And it was hard to get something.
Right.
And so if you found yourself in a mess, people could take you in.
Right.
But you were going to work.
Yeah.
You were going to pull some weight.
Yeah.
Well, and we talked about this too in our when we met about it too. The thing is there was no free market, there was no capitalism, there was none of that back then. So you either had to be born into money or you didn't have it.
Or you didn't have it.
And so the next best way to go up in the economic system was to become somebody rich slave, right? I mean, you got a lot. You got place. You got good place to sleep. You got good food, and you could work for it.
Well,
at the same time.
This makes me think of the parable with the son and the son that left.
Yeah.
And was with the
Prodigal.
swine. It's like, you even take better care of your slave.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that comes into play there.
Yeah.
The slaves were taken care of.
Yes.
They probably got to participate in the leftovers of a big feast or party, which meant they probably got wine. They got to do the good stuff too.
Yes. Yes.
And the other thing, I'm not going to try to keep, beating this dead horse because you already put an end to it and you said, yeah, we can't do that. We can't do it. But I do want to go back. I do just want to go back because of that. Like what we're talking about here, again, in our mindset here as, 2025 and we're white males in a society where slavery, 100 and some years ago, slavery was this, thing that was happening. That slavery is totally different than what was going on here. I shouldn't say totally different, but there are a lot of differences, quite a bit of differences in that. But the other thing is this, like if you go to that pagan person that's on the block getting ready to be sold, and a Hittite could get that person or anybody, and a person who is following Yahweh, the God of Israel, decides to purchase them and bring them into the people of Israel. There's also something to be said for, like, you're not going to, because God told them they were to be set apart and they were to be a holy nation. Now, granted, they messed up and they didn't do that very well. But if that was the case, if you brought a pagan in, you couldn't just buy them and go, you're part of us now, go do whatever you want. So there's a part of that said they had to regulate And if they did that well and with mercy and grace to this person, I still think it was a blessing to them, not a bad thing.
No, I agree with
You know
your
what I'm
point.
saying?
I'm not arguing your point.
Yeah, no, I know
think
you
your
weren't.
point is wonderful.
But you're saying as a non-Christian, they're still
Yeah,
going to
that's
Right.
not why you say that. Yeah.
Right.
The other thing too, I think is really big here to mention right off the rip is nowhere in the Bible, in the Old Testament or New, does it tell you that you can look down on another man as less than human.
True.
These
correct.
people were not looking on these people. They were still saw these people as people.
Right.
They were people with problems,
Right.
economic and
Right.
living and whatever, or pagan. You know.
Right. Right.
We conquered you. Yada yada yada.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fast forward to modern day slavery that we all are taught about and think about.
Yeah.
When we went and made Africans slaves, we looked at the African nation as less than human.
Yes.
Right.
And
Yes.
that's where the big problem came.
Yeah. 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 Which is no different than the Nazis and the Jews and the Egyptians when the Pharaoh finally died after Joseph, and then they enslaved the Hebrews back. I mean, slavery has been going on way before we've heard about it, and part of it always comes back to power. And I think God was trying to get the Israelites to understand this is not about power; this is about grace. So even having people in your quote possession is still about mercy and grace and being kind and good to these, these individuals who, of course, need your help right now because they're down on their luck and they don't have anything, or even a pagan that you would purchase. But we won't go there. All right. So Justin, throw us next.
All right. So side point that I want to bring up before I forget that I don't have a lot of. It's just a thought. I don't have scripture to back all of this up, but it's just a thought that rolled in my head for a little bit, and I mentioned it to you a little. But again, back then, the whole covenant was different, right?
Right.
The Holy Spirit didn't live in any human back then. So I just wonder how different were the people of the Old Testament versus us now, as far as like morality, understanding of morality, and understanding of God.
Right.
I'd like to think that our understanding of God has gotten better as we've moved along and we have received the Holy Spirit, which the people back then didn't have.
Yeah.
So I'm just I would be curious to see, what their mindset is like and how different Israelites would have thought and even acted, or in their processes for that sole purpose. Not only is a culture drastically different,
Right.
and life expectancy and
I think you woke up every day to survive.
right.
We don't have that.
No. And how different is it now that we have everything we need living in us, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? They had to make their sacrifices every single day, right?
Yeah.
They had to repent. They had to go to the priest to communion with God in the tabernacle, whereas we have the tabernacle living inside of us every single day.
And they couldn't go. The priest could go, but they couldn't go.
They couldn't even physically go in there. It was the priest only.
Yeah, you made that point the other day with us.
So I'm just curious. There's nothing really that I found scripturally to back that up, that they're that much different, or that I could point to that their decision making or whatever is that different. But I find it hard to believe that such a significant change to how the spiritual and physical world worked.
Yeah.
If this is all objectively true,
Right.
it's true regardless. And how different was it back then?
Yeah.
And how people acted, and were people able to change as easily as we are now? Right. We see some people accept the Holy Spirit now, and like that, their life is altered completely in an instant. Right. They drop addiction. They drop all almost every sin that they are aware of in an instant. I wonder if that wasn't even a thing back then. I wonder if what did that look like?
They're
back
like
then?
they're like, what's wrong with having a slave?
Yeah, right. It didn't even cross their mind. Like it was not even.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think there's something there, but I don't know. I haven't found scripture to articulate that and back that up either. So I don't want to read anything into the scripture, but I thought it was an interesting point to make.
Yeah.
There was a movie that I watched. It's been almost a year ago or so, and it was depicting the life of Abraham and him going on the walk to take Isaac.
Oh.
Okay, and what I found interesting about it was at one point they come across travelers and how hostile everything could have been. Okay. It very much, again, this idea, we have no idea about survival and traveling across a land to take your son to sacrifice him. It makes it all this much harder. You come across 3 people. What I found interesting to note was, and because you don't kind of, I feel like they took liberty. They portrayed Abraham as a warrior or someone they knew could defend. Okay?
Yeah.
And I think that you just earned, like, was Abraham a great warrior that we know of?
You're talking about Jacob.
Jacob. No. I'm talking about Abraham and Isaac. When Abraham took Isaac,
Yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And
when he went to sacrifice.
Yes, okay, and they're taking liberties, I'm sure. But if you think about the time period, you can see bandits running up and down a road because they're surviving.
Right.
And they knew Abraham was a man who could defend himself. Even though he was older man.
Yeah.
They were wary of him.
It was like the book of Eli.
Kind of, yes.
Yeah.
No, and in that context, you go, I think it could be like that. So I guess I'm saying all this because we're talking about how things used to be, and I don't think we can grasp how things were at those times.
No.
That old.
Yeah. and I think too what Justin was getting at too is that the nation of Israel was what we call a theocracy. So this is like not so God is the supreme ruler of this people group.
Yeah.
And the priests and the Levites and Moses or Joshua, whoever's at the leadership and the head here, they talk to God, and God's the one who dictates and tells them what to do. And in the midst of this culture and in the midst of this world that they're living in, it appears that not just with slavery, but there's different places where God comes in and he works with the people in their human constructs. Yeah. And he patiently works with them to bring them to places where they need to be. And I think even like with slavery, this was God's grace and patience working in these cultures.
Well, it shows you that this is all his plan.
Yeah.
Even if you think you're in a bad place, you're a part of his plan.
Right.
You are, as long as you are a follower and a servant of Christ and God.
Yeah.
You are.
Yeah.
He is working through you.
Right.
So on that kind of was what I hear all the time, right? There's this in like all the videos that I watch, is like there's this biblical trajectory that God is eventually relieving the slaves. And so with that, like that's kind of my problem though, right? Is like, again, it still brings me back to the question, okay, but he calls them to be set apart for all these other things. Why are we not just, it'd be hard. Yeah. It'd be so hard back in that day, in that time, because everybody had slaves, and you were not prosperous if you didn't have slaves, essentially. You couldn't get work done. You couldn't get enough work done to be that prosperous, right? And so why would God not just allow or tell them, cut it off, Yeah. And so with that, here's a whole nother point that I want to start digging into. Is the question is what if the Old Testament isn't God's moral law? What if all the Mosaic law is not moral law at all? What if this is law to, and I think I have evidence for this, what if this is the rules to operate in the society? Not because maybe
civil law.
Maybe God's intent was not to change all their morals all at once.
Right.
Maybe God's intent was, this is how you're going to operate under the current law, under the current culture.
Yep.
And here's what you do with what you already have, and what you and where you're going to go. Because again, the you see over and over again, Jesus says they miss the point of the law.
Yeah.
Right? God. That means that God didn't give his point right then and there. Right? There was something deeper that they had to read into on purpose.
Right.
They missed it, and we missed it in the New Testament. They missed it in the New Testament, right? He points over and over again saying, no, you have heard it said so-and-so, and I tell you this, right? He goes way deeper spiritually, not just physically. It's a spiritual change, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's some connections there as well. I think the old covenant is very physical, and then the new covenant is very spiritual. And that's why Jesus talks to like a heart problem. And I think that's why they sacrificed physical sacrifices back in the Old Testament, and now we don't do that now. We have an internal battle now.
Right.
I think there's a lot of comparisons there. But regardless, there's a lot of evidence that this wasn't for moral purposes at all. This is just how to operate in society a better way, in the society that you're already operating in.
So
This is not a representative of morals.
right.
Yeah.
No,
If
I
that's
think
the case,
yeah.
then we can't look at this and say, "Oh, the Bible condones slavery," and then that answers my question of why did God not just say cut it off?
Right.
Well, because that wasn't his intent.
Yeah.
His intent wasn't to change the whole structure, the whole system.
Right.
His intent was to have the Israelites act differently. That was the intent, and if that was the intent, then it's fulfilled, right?
Yeah.
That was the purpose had been fulfilled.
Yeah.
If the intent was to give moral direction, I think you could argue that that was not met in those Mosaic law.
Okay. So I think I hear what you're saying, and I think I agree about the concept that this is civil law, and this is, like you said, it's working out the constructs of, how you're supposed to deal with these things within the culture and the society. However, I think how would you say this? I think the root, though, of how God tells them to interact with these slaves then becomes moral to them.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because, like, for instance, he tells them clearly that if you take, like, someone and they're poor and they can't take care of themselves and you bring them in, then first of all, you still treat them like a brother. You don't treat them harshly. They're your indentured servant, but you still take care of them. And then after 6 years, you got to set them free.
Right.
And so the idea is that my moral obligation is to take care of my brother. So what I'm doing is I'm morally now I'm fulfilling that by taking care of my brother and bringing them, and I'm not going to treat them harshly, and I'm going to love them and take care. And then at 6 years, whether they've paid the debt off or not,
Right.
I'm obeying God and I'm letting them go. And actually, I'm going to let them go and give them some things, to get started with.
Right.
Then on the other hand, you go back to the war time and they take the slaves in. And again, I think it's moral in the sense that God is saying to them, okay, listen, you've taken these people, now you're bringing them in as slaves, but morally, they're not living morally. So you have to now you're going to have to structure that. You're going to have to oversee that with them. And so the way to do that then is you take them as slaves, and now you're going to have to, at least govern that so that this immorality doesn't happen. We can't have children being sacrificed inside of our
Right.
people group.
Right.
We can't have bestiality happening. Now, granted, Israel fell into those things as well. But I think God, then there's a foundation or a root that eventually, so it's civil. Here's how you're going to work this out. Here's how you're going to do this. And so then you get inside there and you go, this is a moral thing. And I think that's why, like, for instance, if you own a slave and you beat him. So first of all, God doesn't say it's okay to beat him, but he realizes that some of you Israelites, you guys are not going to be moral and you're going to beat your slaves. So here's what I'm telling Moses. If you beat them and you knock their tooth out or you put their eye out, you need to let them go free. Because number one, it's not right. You shouldn't have beat them in the first place, but then they should get to go free. And if you beat them within an inch of their life and they recover, now this is the problem when we were talking about, there's no vengeance taken. But if they die, then your life will be taken.
Right.
And again, that comes back to moral law.
Yeah.
Because you can't just murder someone. You can't just beat someone for no reason. And we talked a little bit about this too, and this is inference. It doesn't say it in the text. But if you have a slave and they're not a brother or a sojourner in your land, and they're say for instance they're just being rebellious, like they want to kill their babies because they want to sacrifice them to Molech or something, and you try to stop that, and they get violent with you, and then you get into a tussle. I mean, that law could be there for that very purpose. That now you go to court and they're like, man, you beat your slave and they recovered, but you're not. No one's going to take vengeance on you because we understand this. Now, it doesn't say that in the law, But I still would think that God is not okay with you just beating your slave for no reason.
Yeah, I think it's pointing to morals. I don't think it's an actual moral law.
No, I think it's
right?
still civil. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you're right in the fact that it's civil. But I think ultimately God is getting to a moral place that this is how you need to treat them.
Yeah. And so evidence of that is what, Matthew 19 I had.
Oh, yeah.
In Matthew 19, this is where they're asking, Jesus, why did Moses allow divorce, right? Let me pull it up.
Because if your first wife isn't that pretty. That's what the Pharisees said. If she has a mole,
Matthew?
in the Talmud, I was reading in the Talmud, and they said if she has a mole that is becoming unbecoming, you could divorce her.
Oh, and she only had to shave the hair off.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe if they just pluck the hairs
Yeah.
on the mole, it'd be better.
So yeah, Matthew 19, pretty much all the way through 11, 1 through 11. The large crowds followed Jesus. They asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason?" Jesus goes on to say, "Have you not read?" Referring to the creation story. God made them male and female,
Right.
and for this reason they leave their father and mother, become united, and the two become one flesh. And then they ask, well, then why did Moses command that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away?
So you're in verse 8 now. Okay.
And then so in 8 it says, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts are hard, right? So there was an exception to the law because their hearts were hard.
Right.
Not saying that that's morally what God wanted,
Right.
right? Because Jesus just referenced beforehand that they are to be one flesh, they are to be separated or be united, separate from their mother and father. But because these people, there were exceptions made.
Yeah.
Right. This isn't all encompassing 100% moral law.
Right.
There are exceptions made for these Israelites because obviously God knew these Israelites could not fulfill even
Right.
a small bit of what was moral back then, right? And so this applies to slaves as well.
Yeah.
God knew that they could not follow even the smallest little. There's no way they could have gotten rid of the slavery on their own. They just couldn't do it back in that time. So God never said it, and to specifically just cut it all off, He says, "All right, I know you people are messed up, right? Here's what you should do to just start getting the idea here.
Yeah.
Right? Here's what I want you to do. Here's just a little inch you forward towards morality."
Yeah.
And it says, and that's what he's talking about is Moses made these exceptions because these people were hard of heart.
Yeah.
And my thought is well, part of me thinks is that goes back to my Holy Spirit thought.
Yeah.
Like there is no Holy Spirit in their hearts, right? And there won't be in their time, right? Until Jesus fulfills the law, right? But
I think that's a good argument. And the last part of 8 that you read, I think too, we should think about. And he says, "But from the beginning, it has not been this way." So the whole concept of divorce in the beginning, it wasn't that way, but it's because of sin. So now, if you come back to the slavery thing, I would think Jesus would say the same thing. Or if God in the Old Testament was going to explain this, listen, I'm going to give you some civil law of how you treat slaves. But from the beginning, this was not supposed to be how it was.
Yep.
Right? Same concept.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a good argument.
And so with that too, I had 1 Samuel 8, jumping all the way back, and then I have another one in Numbers as well. But in 1 Samuel 8, this is when Israel asks for a king.
Yeah.
So this is an instance where God allows them to do something that he didn't want, right?
Yeah.
He said, listen, to have a king is a bad idea. That's not my plan for you.
Right.
And they asked about that.
Right.
They said, well, we want a king, in defiance. And he said, fine, here's a king, have a king. I'm supposed to be your king, but here's your physical earthly king.
Right.
So I think that also is more evidence to where God in a sense, allows them to make changes to the law, to the Mosaic law, not moral law. We're talking not morally. This is not a representation of God's morals.
Right.
and character.
Right.
Right? This is a representation of the Israelites
Right.
who are asking for a thing that God doesn't want them to do.
Yeah.
And in the same way God turns people over to their sins,
Right.
he let the Israelites have a king, even though he said it was a bad idea in the first place.
Right.
Um,
Well, notice too what he says, like in verse 13 of that passage. He says, listen, if you get a king, here's what's going to happen. He will take your daughters for perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and your vineyards. He will take 1/10 of your seed. He will also take your male servants and your female servants and your best young men and your donkeys and use them for his work. I mean, God knows what's going to happen if you get outside of his,
Yep. And I think that's should change potentially a little bit of anybody's understanding of the Old Testament law, right? Especially when you're looking at it as in the sense of slavery,
Right.
and in the sense of even taking nations,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
These are potentially things that the people wanted to do and thought were right, and God allowed it to happen because he saw he knew the outcome, and he saw a way to make it work for his glory and not their glory, right? He'll take any bad that we think of and make good out of it.
Yeah.
And that's just another example. The Mosaic law would not be, from what I've looked at, is not, you can't look at it for moral clarity, or representation of God's morals or character. It's more civil, like you were saying, with exceptions to just inch them towards morality.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing in the Mosaic law. It's broken down. I mean, there's dietary laws, there's civil laws, there's moral law. And I think what you're saying is, although this has a prescription from God about morality of how you treat these people, ultimately this kind of lands in the civil law area. And I think that's a good argument for that.
And then even on civil too. So if you go to Numbers 27, don't know how to say that name, but Zelophehad's daughters.
Pretty close.
Okay.
So you nailed it.
All right. Perfect.
Wow.
Perfect.
That's pretty good.
So it's an example of basically these daughters. Their father died, right? Daughters come up to Moses, and they said, "We don't have inheritance because our father died. Why is his name just gonna die, and we get no inheritance? Can we have something?" Right? Along those lines. And this is an instance where Moses specifically brings this to God, and then it says in verse 5, so Moses brought their case before the Lord, and the Lord said to them, what Zelophehad,
Just call him Zell.
Zell's daughters are saying is right. You must certainly give them property as an inheritance among their father's relatives, and give them their father's inheritance to them. Say to the Israelites, if a man dies and leaves no son, give his inheritance to his daughter. If he has no daughter, give his inheritance to his brother. If he has no brother, give his inheritance to his father's brothers. If his father, it goes on, right? So this is all civil, and there's evidence of a change being made to the law with God's permission.
Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
So they were allowed to bring it to Moses. Moses then bring it to God, and then God make a change to the Mosaic law.
Right. I think it's a good point.
There's tweaks being made,
Right.
and you would argue imperfect tweaks being made by the Israelites, potentially against God's will.
Right.
Right.
Right. And this goes back to, like, even to the kinsman redeemer concept, that if a young lady is married to a guy and he dies, then the brother is to take her as his wife.
Yep.
Now, granted, we would say, well, she's not his property. But that young lady would not have much opportunity in a culture where women were not, seen as, taking care of themselves.
Right.
So now this man comes in and does that, and we would say, well, like we just talked a little bit before we come on air, that in today's society, it's like, well, the woman can take care of herself. She's strong and she can have it. Well, back then it wasn't like that in that culture. And so that man was hopefully, from a moral standpoint, was going to take her in and care for her the way God would. And that was a good thing. But it comes back to that concept of kinsman redeemer. And again, this is the thing we don't think a lot about. God's working with us. I mean, think about the things he has to be going, oh my, seriously? Okay, I guess I got to do this now.
Right. I guess that's what I was saying earlier about even in the bad places. It's part of his plan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So like.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. This discussion is not over. I know our time has run away. I mean, it's like 8:15 already, so it's been quick. But there's a lot still left to discuss. So I don't know. Maybe we could do a part 2 because I know there's a lot left, right, Justin?
In a sense, yeah.
Because I know I have about 15 other verses that I can't find laying on a little note sheet somewhere.
Yeah.
That we could talk about. Is there anything we should address online, Matt, that maybe someone wanted to make a point or a thought or
just not the what they meant by slave is not what our understanding of the word slave is. Well, I'm pretty sure
it's a slave.
I'm pretty sure a slave was a slave.
Yeah. Unless you're talking about like our
again,
our Western culture concept of slavery.
It's the separation of the African slave was looked at as less than human.
Right.
So they still were a slave, but then they were also less than human.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Whereas slavery is just having someone work for you.
Right.
You're to care for them, and you can almost beat them dead, but not quite.
Yeah.
Not quite.
Yeah, and again too, like what they might be talking about is the idea of the indentured servant or the bond slave.
Yeah.
So I've bonded myself out because I'm poor or I need I owe you a debt, and so that is different, obviously, than taking and stealing someone. And it has, I think it's in Leviticus 25. It says if you kidnap someone and make him your slave, God said, you're not doing that. No way. Or if you steal a slave from somewhere, you can't do that. So again, it goes back to, I think, a good argument that you made, and that is part of the civil law. There's still this moral thing that God's poking them because he's like, listen, you guys aren't going to get this, but let me poke you a little bit. You can't kidnap people or make them your slaves. It's not right,
Well, he had to tell them everything to do.
I know.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything they could do on there. It's what you were saying. Like, he told them how to poop outdoors.
He did. You got to cover it up. Deuteronomy.
Right. So they didn't even know how to do that.
Right.
So,
and we have septic systems with infrared light that kills all the bacteria.
Well, we talked about why we don't need God now. I mean, we've already done that.
Yeah, we know.
We are our own gods.
And we have antibiotics. Let's face it.
Well, they kind of don't work as good.
Well, yeah, that's true. But they are
still
helpful.
Have them.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind getting my hands on some Cipro right now. This stuff's probably a lot of money right now, but it's like one of the strongest. So if you're in trouble and you need some Cipro.
All right. So are we going to do a part 2? Like, I'm assuming part 2 would be a New Testament then look.
We could travel into there, but I think there's still.
You think there's still Old Testament stuff?
There's still a little bit more in the Old Testament we could probably chew on. So maybe we could chew on that a little bit and then run into the New Testament.
Yeah, I think with the big thing on this one, I think I wanted to bring up is potentially we need to look at the Old Testament differently than what I thought it was for sure.
Yeah.
If we come at it from a different context, which is the correct, I think.
Right.
A more correct understanding of the Old Testament is that this isn't you can't base the Old Testament law on what's morally good.
Right.
You have to look at what the deeper meaning is to all of these laws, and then there's civil law. It's broken up. It's not as clear cut as somebody would be, coming up to you and saying, "Oh, what about Leviticus 25? What about Exodus 21?" And these, pulling these out of context. It's not that clear and cut. It's very complicated, and the whole framework of how you view Mosaic law is different than what I think most people think, right? It's not all morally based. The Israelites had a high influence in what was made, what was put in that law.
Right.
And it was left in there, right? It's not an image of God's character or his absolute morals.
Right. Yeah, like eating shrimp or crustaceans was not a moral issue.
No, right.
But it was setting them apart from whatever
there
dietary
was
laws.
Ceremonial, there was civil, and then some moral as well in there, right?
Yeah. Dietary, ceremonial, civil, and moral.
So, wasn't dietary solely for ceremonial purposes, to be cleansed, and can't eat anything?
No, not necessarily. Some of it was basically because
as a
God is
whole.
saying the pagans are doing this way. Some people believe that it was for hygiene purposes as well, or I'm sorry, health purposes.
I think it was health.
Yeah, because let's face it, you eat pig wrong, you're
Yeah.
you're gonna get a worm and die.
You could.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Well,
Especially back then, though.
Yeah.
Like, right? Like
Well,
that was God's.
30 years ago.
yeah.
Oh.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It was a big thing with the Seventh-day Adventists.
Yeah. Now that we put them in, and, we bleach everything.
Yeah.
We make sure there's no
Yeah.
live.
Then we irradiate it.
Then we radiate it.
Right.
Yeah.
Then we bleach it again.
Bleach it again.
Then we pummel it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's not anything that could live in there, even protein
And
and
if I'm
stuff.
not mistaken, they fill it with mRNA now. mRNA.
No, they do
Yeah, they're
not.
putting a shot right in there.
The meat?
Yeah.
All right, get your meat from. We're gonna get Kemp's to support us, but get your meat from Kemp's. It's on what's the street? It's
Parks
on
West.
Parks West.
Roll the sponsor clip.
Yeah,
You can also go to Sam there on the corner.
you could. You
Yeah.
could go to Sam on the
What
corner.
is that? Bob likes to go there with his
I can custom
Yeah, you go to custom.
custom meats.
Then that way no one can say we're playing
Yeah.
favorites.
However, I do want to tell you though, okay, unless you get the fresh stuff and you just get it in bulk and you buy it up front, if you get the patties or different things like that, you're gonna have some like preservative things in there. So just read your labels. That's all. Me and Brandon walked in.
Where's this at?
Kemp's or custom.
Really?
Yeah. Me and Brandon and I walked in and we were looking at some stuff. And I'm like, Brandon, look at this label, because it was one of the frozen ones of the patties.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this isn't on the fresh stuff. And he's like, no. He's like, you got to be kidding me. He goes, I've been eating this stuff. He was mad at a hornet. And we're over there laughing. So Bob Anasaski comes in later and asks if there were two people in at Custom Meats. And this lady goes, yeah, I think it was some old guy and his son. I'm like, they did not say that. And Bob's like, yeah, they did. And I'm like, Bob, I think you're lying. I'm like, there's no way they thought Brandon was my son and I was that old. But anyway, we'll go with that.
No, it makes you feel super
And
good.
she said,
Yeah.
she told Bob, though, she said the guys were just laughing about stuff and then they left. So that she probably thought we were trying to case the joint or
Right.
something. But we just didn't want to buy it because it had stuff in it.
So you seriously haven't been hearing that they're mRNAing pork?
I have not heard that, no. Yeah. You got to be kidding me.
Yeah, I know.
That is nuts.
That's if you don't believe that they're feeding you feral hogs from Texas that are full of sulfates.
That's why, you know what? I'm just starting to become an egg guy. I love my little 9 chickens,
Your little
my little girls,
Yep.
and they give us some eggs. So it's really cool.
You gonna replenish the herd?
Eventually, when they stop, I'll be like, "Hey, you're going into the soup."
Oof.
They're such good little girls. They're so good.
I don't know that you can eat a chicken that's that old.
Well, someone said you could boil them
Yeah,
for soup, but
let it roll a while.
we'll see what happens. And if not, then we'll cut them up and
Tame down that shoe leather.
yeah, we'll just have to get rid of them somehow. I don't know. I feel bad for them. I know April. She said she can't be around when we do it. So
Yeah, we did it to our roosters. It was a little rough.
yeah,
It's harder than I thought.
I don't have a problem. Those roosters are mean.
That's
man.
why we had to get rid of. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, they're just mean.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it.
Messing with the
But
kids.
the hens,
It's
they're like,
fun when they run after your children, though.
Oh my goodness, they attack them so.
It's so fun.
hard.
Or your dog.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a good time.
yeah. All right. Well, yeah. If you have any other thoughts or you're thinking about this stuff, then probably let's see. This is January, right? So February, maybe second Friday or second Thursday of February or somewhere in around there, we'll be back on. We'll do a premiere, or not a premiere, but we'll do a scheduled live show.
Yeah.
We'll get a thing out.
Well, I think we'll try and do that more regularly
Okay.
with all of our shows.
All right. Yeah. So just stay watching.
We're gonna try and make this show gooder.
Yeah. It should be gooder,
Yeah.
especially for the uneducated.
Right. Absolutely.
I would agree. All right. Well, it was good being with you tonight. And you guys have a good weekend. If you do not have a place to worship, and you want to find a church that teaches
There's lots
the
of good
truth,
churches
there
everywhere.
are.
Look one up.
So find one and
Yeah.
go there. And if you can't find a really good one, we have services here on Sunday.
Oh,
at,
is that where you were going?
at 11:00. Yeah. And so if you can't find a really good one,
Middlefield's got like 3 good churches.
really?
Yeah.
All right. Well, if those are packed,
In fact,
overflow, come here.
In fact, one of them's got excavators behind it.
Really?
I think they're adding on.
No.
Yeah.
I think they have a water problem.
Is that what
I think
it
they
is?
forgot how to cover up their feces. So they've been reading Deuteronomy, and they're like, get a backhoe,
Look what we're doing wrong.
pick
people.
that baby up. Yeah.
Look what
Yeah.
we're doing wrong.
All right. Well, hey, you guys have a good evening and a good weekend.
We'll catch you hopefully next week.
Yep. Sounds good.
All right. Go ahead. You finish out your thought.
Well, we got an error report.